1 minute.
I'll take door number 2, by the way.
Door number 2. All right. Looking for Jesse's mark here. Okay, welcome to 1,000 Ways to be a Champion for Humans. You might say, wait a minute, I thought that was called 1,000 Ways to be a Champion for Children. If that was the case, I couldn't invite Connie Marie back. So now I had to change the show so I can accommodate Connie Marie on it. So the being a champion for children, still applicable, still something we want to address about adverse childhood experiences, encourage adult survivors of childhood trauma to go and readdress, revisit those situations where they felt hopeless and helpless and move forward to get to a healing that they can lead better lives. In this case, Connie Marie is a champion for seniors. Connie Marie, thank you so much for coming on our little program here. By the way, we're broadcasting from Blackfoot territory, the ancestral home of the Blackfoot Nation. And Connie Marie, tell us about the lovely work that you do in supporting seniors in our community.
Well, thanks for the invitation, Alan. I had to kind of giggle when I got your email because it does say 1,000 ways to be a champion for children. And I thought, oh no, maybe that's what he really wanted me to talk about. But it's kind of interesting because, I remember being told a long time ago something that always resonated with me that kind of fits, and that often we have to care for our parents as they cared for us as children. Mm-hmm. And that, is sometimes unfortunate and often a role or responsibility that, many don't necessarily want to play. But I think it's a reality, especially in light of COVID and the restrictions and the lack of a senior to be out and to be connected and just to be out and about. We have a lot more responsibility as children of aging parents to take care of them. So mm-hmm. in some ways, fit with your invitation for me to just remember what I was taught. So yes, I am a champion for seniors. In fact, I'm passionate, and some would say sometimes a little too loud, but I think that just comes sometimes when you're passionate about something. This passion for me came through life experience and years of caring for my parents and family members, and now my in-laws and my sister. And so it's just been over a long time, actually, that I've been a part of this. My husband also has worked in seniors care for over 20 years. So it's kind of, we talk about it now, but that it's our life. So our morning coffee, our morning chat is always about what's going on in each of our days, but it's always related to seniors. Mm-hmm. So I thought how I would start to share today is I'm going to just share 12. I don't have 1,000, thank goodness. But
well, you have 12 of the 1,000. We'll get somebody else for the 988. So yeah.
12 of the 1,000 that I will share with you that I think are important for each of us to think about if we want to be a champion for seniors in our community.
Hey, Connie Marie, before you start that list, I want to make an observation and see if you agree with me. I think for most people, as they age, their world starts to kind of contract, right? They have less and less connections to other people. And then with COVID, that was just a slam down that kind of, in many cases, ended all their connections, right? For a lot of seniors, right? So the normal isolation type process that might happen, and that's sad that that happens, but it's just been exacerbated through these very challenging times. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, in fact, it's actually extreme. And especially for those living alone in their own
Mhm.
homes, which are many in this community, this is often a fairly easy community to stay in your own home and keep your own home, maintain your own home. So that it's actually really, really a high rate of the seniors that I work with. So I do work directly now coordinating the Keep in Touch program for Volunteer Lethbridge, which is a program that supports seniors and the disabled as well. But the number that I get, the majority of who are referred to us for caller support are seniors who are living in their home alone. I had a call today, I have to share with you though, with a 95-year-old who was referred to the program. And so I needed a little bit more details about her. So I always do the intake calls. And I said, I just needed to call you and get a little bit more information and get some idea of your interests and hobbies too, so that we can be a little more selective in who we have calling you. And I said, so I've got your birth date, but I don't have your address. And she just stops and she said, oh dear, do you think that I really am so dumb I would give you my address? So I had to laugh and I said to her, I said, no, it's actually because we're so dumb, just because of our computer system, we have to collect it. It's part of our system in keeping a record. So, but she still was not giving me her address. And I
It
thought,
wasn't happening.
hats off to her. She's well trained and she's learned there's certain things that you don't do, but it's actually the first one I've ever had. And to be 95 and to be able to turn around and just say to me, no, dear, I can't believe you asked me that question. That was just great. It was really fun.
There's nothing wrong with her gray matter. It's working pretty darn well.
Yeah,
She's
it's
right on top of it.
very, very well.
That's awesome. That's amazing, right? 95 to be sharp still, to be living in your own home. That's exceptional, right? So
yeah, it is exceptional and lonely, not, medical issues and that are very minimal, just lonely. So
yes, exactly. Yeah. Are we doing a countdown or are we doing a count up? Are we doing 12 down to 1 or 1 up to 12?
Well, I think let's do 1 up to 12.
1 up to 12. What is number 1, Connie Marie?
Well, the first thing I want you to think about, though, is how you define senior. So before we go through the 12, I was thinking, we often, when our parents reach that age, our parents are 65, oh, my parents are seniors, or we reach 65, we're seniors. But really, there's different definitions. Like we actually use Lethbridge Housing definition in our program, which is 50 plus, because there are a lot of people living independently in seniors housing that are 50 plus. So the other point I wanted to make was, is a senior, are you looking at a senior? It's often the parent only that we look at. Whereas, is it a friend? Do you have friends that are seniors that could use some support? Do you have a family member? Maybe last summer, we moved my cousin because she has no family here except us, even though we're distant cousins. But is it a family member that you can support or help or do something for? Or is it a neighbor? Because I think that the reality today is all these that are living in their homes alone and really, really lonely, they're often in a neighborhood. So if they're in their home alone, they're in a neighborhood. And I can count 3 in my neighborhood. There's 3 homes I know of I can see out my door that I know contain seniors who have lost their spouses and are alone. So it's important to define what you define as a senior, because your support and maybe some attention, even a little bit of attention to that person could be really beneficial. So the first one is to show up.
Show up.
Show up. And I think about that with it just being Thanksgiving. We showed up at my mother and father-in-law's, who are totally housebound and don't probably the only interaction they do have with us. It is with us, actually. And we didn't want to, we wanted to just see them in their home on Thanksgiving because we didn't want to expose them. And we still wore masks and everything, just because my husband's been around some COVID and the care facilities. So just show up and bring them flowers. And also, thinking about fall now, if you've got a neighbor again, help them get rid of the frostbitten flowers in the yard. Because, winter, boy, I had no idea it was going to be 8 below last night, and everything that was still okay is not okay. So that is a really simple thing, but bring them flowers and take care of the flowers in the yard right now because it's fall. They have a lot of things to do that it's not that they can't manage, but maybe they can do some of it and could really use just a helping hand if you see them carrying something out to the garbage or doing something.
And Connie, when you're saying show up, I don't think you're saying show up and make sure you're there for 8 hours. Like
No.
it could be if all you got is 20 minutes, give the 20 minutes. Go and say hi and just checking in with you, and good to see your smiling face. And right, I mean, I think that's still a value, even if that's all you got, that's all you got to give, right?
That's not, again, it's show up, and it doesn't need to be a large amount of time. The second one is to bring them dinner. So that's the other thing we did was, a turkey TV dinner. And you're never too old to appreciate someone cooking supper for you ever. And especially us girls out there, by the way, I'm going to be a little sexist here, but you're never
I
too
think
old.
that's a very fair comment there, Connie Marie. Us guys, we just kind of kick back on the chair often instead of being a part of the meal prep type process. And yeah, yes.
Yeah, and so and a TV dinner, it's not that you have to go out and buy something or run around or do anything. It's if you're making a dinner on a Sunday or whatever, make a little bit extra and drop it off. Drop it over, and probably don't have to stay as long when you bring something good to eat. And some of these things, it's so interesting because they're simple, but what I've learned, especially in working with the seniors all day, every day, the last year and a half, it is the simple things. That's really what they need, is the simple things. The other thing is to see things how they really are now, not how you think that they should be, especially towards the end of life. So, we look at it and we're running in there and we're trying to fix everything. We're trying to get them to be better. We're trying to get them to do this, get them to do that. And sometimes we just have to look at how things are and look for, often with the end of life or the final stage of life, there comes a contentment. So it might be far from how we imagine them living, but if they're comfortable and they're content, then we should be grateful for that instead of trying to always move them to, being better or doing more, especially with doing more.
I think if I'm following you, it's kind of like help them with what they want help with. Like, don't try and say, oh, you got to do this or like that kind of a thing. It's like, okay, this is what you want to do. How can I help you do that? How can I make this more comfortable for you? Yeah. Okay. I understand that. That makes sense.
So we really have a role too, because we have to let go of our expectations and have a level of acceptance. And that's hard, especially if they're not well. It's really hard to move to that place of acceptance. And we also, the next one is we let them have the power of choice unless they're at considerable risk. So again, what we see as being okay, or what they should be doing, and what they see as being okay might be different. I wouldn't want to be, I can't imagine being totally housebound. But the reality is, especially in this environment right now, being totally housebound, but being able to access the services you need and getting your needs met, that probably puts them at less risk. And if they're content, then not how we would want to live, but as long as they're choosing, and especially those that do want to stay in their homes, because that definitely is a personal choice, and definitely across the country, that's the majority of what people want to do. So we have to accept it for what it is, not what we think it should look like.
That makes sense.
I like the point you made, though, and we'll go back to that, is do what you really, or don't do what you really don't want to do, or don't have the patience to do. So there's no point if you feel like you should be doing something and you're running in there and you're kind of pushing through it and can't wait to get out of there. Don't do it. Unless it's a big problem, something that you absolutely have to do, maybe, basement flooded, or, maybe something's broken that has to be repaired, or a medical concern. Of course, with a medical concern, you might have to get on board. But, there's services that you can hire, and that they can hire, or if they possibly can't afford to hire, that you can hire. And what I found in working with seniors over the years is generally the barrier to hiring services is not financial. The barriers is that they just don't want to do that. And they also don't want to spend money. Like the generation, my parents' generation, are definitely a generation that they're not gonna pay money to have somebody mow their lawn or shovel their walk, and they're gonna be looking at you, telling you to do it. Well, if the reality of their finances are that they can afford those services, when I go there and I spend time, I want to visit with them and love them. I do not want to have to mow the lawn and do the gardening and do the housework. And especially when you're at work, a lot of us were working full time. We want to go and enjoy our time with them. We don't want to be doing all the other stuff. And that's a really hard thing to communicate or get across to a senior. So often what you need to do is you just don't do it, because you might have to stretch it out for a while, but you just don't do it, so that they finally resort to doing it, especially when it's really affordable and it's kind of the best way for you and them. So think about that. Hear their voice. So they just want to talk to you. And that's one of the things, we teach our volunteers a lot as well, working with Keep in Touch, is, they're going to go on and on and on and share their stories or share their memories or share and just listen. There's really, again, we don't have to be fixing anything. We don't have to be doing anything. It's just them having the opportunity to share.
Well, and also for us as those that are visiting, like, what is it that we can learn, right? I mean, there's decades of life experiences that I haven't had. So that's, they share that with me, and like, I've learned something from that process, right? I've been enriched by the process of listening to their stories, right? So.
Yeah, and you find too, as they age, it's interesting. You often hear of those that actually lose their English and go back to their mother tongue. And so often too, they are more willing to share childhood stories. And what's interesting is, even if they have a form of dementia or a form of Alzheimer's, they often can share a childhood story, and yet they can't tell you what they had for dinner. So it is a real opportune time, a way that to really connect with them in a way that they can communicate with you if you take them back to those childhood stories. So
I'm not sure where I saw this, Connie Marie, but it was in a movie. So I'm not saying it's real life, but the character in the movie was having a conversation with his elderly mother who had dementia. And initially, like, she'd be talking about raccoons doing stuff, like, raccoons behaving as people, and, kind of like that kind of a thing. And first of all, he was, angry and trying to get her to, straighten up and blah, blah, blah. And then after, he kind of had this epiphany that he was just we're having a fun conversation. Let's just make this a fun conversation, right? And so then it was, oh, tell me more about the raccoons. Oh, they were dressed in coveralls, really? And, so it was just this is a fun exchange we're having. The content doesn't matter. If that person feels, this is important for them to express, and you're a willing participant to have this conversation, that's a beautiful thing, right?
Yeah, and sometimes the most frustrating part is the repetition, but you just kind of have to relax and go with wherever they are. The other important part is to be their voice. So you talked about, in this situation now, and with restrictions and COVID, and how, things have they've been put in a lot more lockdown than ever. One of the things they talk about now that is so real, we have a great prof at the University of Lethbridge who did a presentation recently, and she talked about ageism and the epidemic, and how ageism is on just a serious increase, which is meaning that, all the things that they're being locked out of or not being able to do anymore have become far more evident with everything being online. So, and we know the world now. I spend, on this computer, like looking at you, I'm looking at a screen all day at home, and something I've never done in my life. And so we know how much COVID has actually changed to an online world or an online environment. It was interesting at one point, probably the approximately 150 seniors that I've taken in over the last year and a half, that I have probably could count on one hand the number that have internet access and email access.
Really?
So again, yeah, we're far, and I guess it depends too on the particular area, but we are far, far below what people would imagine our seniors, how many are actually connected or can do those things.
You're saying for about the 150 folks, seniors, that you've been trying to aid and assist, and this is from age 50 plus.
Yeah,
right?
I have about 7 that have, that actually can do email and internet. Some of them do have uh, the little booklets or the little,
Yeah.
but
I,
those that actually have an email address and are connected and can actively, it's one of the things we even address with our volunteers, because we do need a volunteer to be able to use email. So it's a couple times we've had seniors that were just recently retired that didn't actually have that ability. So I think it's just a lower level in this community anyway. It's at a lower level than perhaps what I ever thought it was.
yeah, when you're saying 150, I would have thought it was 140 had an email address and an internet connectivity, right? Not 7. So
Yeah, they say the general Canadian stat is approximately about 20%. But again, it's hard to count those that are home in their home alone, or like homes alone, and how are they counting, or how do they know what the
yeah.
actual access is? So it's a difficult group because it's so hidden. So when we talk about ageism, we talk about, to me, I would talk about ageism from the perspective of consumerism, because as you get older, you're still a consumer. So, my in-laws still need groceries every week. They still have money in the bank. They still have house insurance. They still have legal responsibilities. They have a financial wealth manager. They have medical care that they need, prescriptions. So it's interesting because there's many places in their life that they are consumers, that they are being locked out, and just by the complexity of the system. So the bank is an example for them. And it's not, it might not be something that we will ever change, but the reality is they are still, paying a fee for service and still a customer within the banking system. The same with, with groceries, or, some of those, again, who have low mobility, it's hard for them to get out. You can, again, order online, but again, there's that online ordering system. We actually do have 2 grocery stores in the city that are available for a phone order. But again, the online creates some restriction. So as a consumer, I feel that there still needs to be a little more of an open door for them to go in and do business that they need to do. And then the other reality is, when they can't do those things, it requires someone guiding that, whether, especially if you're a family member or child, and, your parents are at that age, it really becomes far too complicated for them to manage a lot of those things, and they do require assistance. And that's something that isn't new, but it certainly is more restricted now because of technology. So that's a place that we can always help. And if they'll let us help, that's the other piece, is we have to have their permission to help. But I think it's really important that what we do is we just review everything with them. And so we don't control it or anything. We just review to help them understand, and then go with them, accompany them. And that can be really, really helpful in all of those areas, any financial area, especially.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next one is another, maybe a simpler one, but bring them apple pie and homemade chicken soup. So
Very specific, that one.
that's a no fail. Yes, that's a no fail. Don't keep telling them what to do when they won't change. So yeah, I learned this after 15 years of beating my head against the wall. Sometimes the only thing that's going to bring about change is crisis. My dad was an example, of someone. He was an old farmer, and he used to say, I'm not leaving this house unless it's on a gurney. Well, that's, that is how he left, and not in the best circumstance, but in a terrible crisis. But that often is how it is. That's, again, if they're accepting of being where they are, and they're comfortable, and they are not changing, then it's really important that that we often are just waiting for a crisis with an older family member that refuses to leave their home and probably needs to be in care. We are often just waiting for a crisis.
Mm-hmm. And if their partner is physically not able to assist them, it puts that person's health at risk too, right? So
Yeah,
Yeah.
it does.
Or maybe not even just physically, like emotionally, that it's, too draining, can't, that kind of a thing, that then that person's health is also at risk too, right? So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, and we don't want that to happen. The last thing we want to see is a crisis happen. But coming in your world of working with victim services, often I'm sure you've had crisis with seniors. It's often a medical crisis where they finally get the care that they need because
Hmm.
a family is unable to move them
Yeah.
out of that home. And as long as they're their own agent, that's the magic word, is if they are their own agent, there is nothing you can do. Even if they end up in a hospitalization and they choose to return home, then there's
Yeah.
nothing that you can do really. If they're of sound mind, there's nothing that you can do. So one of the things through all of this is it's important to take special care of you when you're taking care of them.
Very.
They have some real ups and downs, and there's some real ups and downs for you as well. Emotionally, it can be really difficult. There can be a struggle. There can be, disagreements. My dad used to drive me crazy because he used to fire his housekeeper at least once every couple months. He'd just get into this mood and he'd say, I can't afford to pay you anymore. That was always his thing, was financial. I can't afford to pay you anymore. So you're done. And she'd pick up the phone and she'd call me and she said, "Oh, your dad fired me again today." And I said, "Okay, great. I'll go talk to him and we'll see you next week." And that went on for years. So it was, yeah, you never know what you're going to have to deal with. That's a simple one compared to a major health crisis, but it is
Yeah.
still something you have to, sometimes we have to do a little bit more than it takes. There are things that we have to take care of, but we also have to take care of ourselves.
Yes.
And
Compassion fatigue's a real thing, right?
yeah,
Even there's the professionals that do it every day, right? The people in social services and police and nurses and doctors, and they have that every day. And for us, as just like, not you, I'm going to call you a professional as well, but for somebody like me, then you also have to make sure you're looking after yourself so that you have the capacity to assist somebody else, right?
mhm. Yeah, and if you don't know, then to ask questions as well, or find someone who can help you, just get a little bit more knowledge around something, especially there's been a medical diagnosis or something like that. We have so many great organizations that support, whether it's Parkinson's or MS or Alzheimer's, or there's a lot of great organizations out there. When I went to Alzheimer's for support, it was interesting because my mother-in-law would not go. There was no way. So sometimes we have to be the ones who hook into that education or that support, to know what they need and what we can do when they're unwilling to access support. That can be also really, really helpful.
So you went and took the education component so that you could, in a subtle way, share it with your mother-in-law, kind of a thing.
Yeah, and I met to find out what I could do with her not being willing to access support. And some of that's just generational. Again, our generation has been far more exposed. We've been far more eager to, it's just been a part of our life. Lifelong learning has been a part of our lives. That's kind of what we were taught. So it's just a different generation. That's, those that are at the end of life now. It's the generation before that didn't have those experiences. They got a job and they went to work, and many of them worked in the same job for 30 or 40 years. And that's kind of what they know. So we always have to remember what it is they know.
Yes. Connie Marie, we don't have to follow this thread. I'm going to throw it out there and I'll see if you want to follow this. Okay. Speaking of end of life, during COVID, suicide, medical assisted dying, I realize those are two different things, but I think both of them have risen. There's more activity in both of those. Is that a fair statement? Do you want to talk about that?
I'm not familiar with the activity in those areas. We do know, amongst seniors there is an increase in addiction. We also know there is an increase in bankruptcy. Those things that I do know. The other thing I think we don't measure, that we don't know how to measure, and you're hearing a little bit about it now, and that many who perhaps have a cancer diagnosis or have something, they're not being able to access services as easy, or surgeries are being canceled. So we know that we're hearing about those things. Now, I'm not a medical person, but I know some of the seniors that we're supporting have indicated that surgeries and that have been canceled, which has been a real concern for them. One of the things that we don't measure that I wonder how much impact there really is how many more seniors we've lost in the last 2 years compared to, let's say, the 2 years before that, that were so strongly impacted by isolation and the lack of connection and the stress and all of those things. So they certainly could have contributed to, even natural deaths. But I think overall the stress and the fear and could be very much a contributor. And we haven't been measuring that. We do measure deaths, of course, by the pandemic, but I don't know if they measure the actual numbers in a certain age range, perhaps, that have been lost.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I know that we see that, for the seniors that we support on a weekly basis that we've been supporting for, a year and a half, we have seen a significant decline in their health, and they're indicating significant health declines, not only the onset of depressions and that's probably the main one, is an onset of depression, but also they have identified that even those have increased mobility issues. So that just overall stress on their system and whatever their ailment is definitely has impacted them, and perhaps, led to the loss of life. My sister was an example. So as a senior, she was 72, and she developed cancer. And then being left alone, she was actually left alone from the sudden death of her husband. But having cancer and being left alone, one of the things she indicated to me, because I actually talked to her. So I talked to her every day at 12 o'clock the last year of her life, because she was in Calgary. So I tried to get there as often as I could, but I talked to her every day, and that was my way of staying connected to her. And what I heard from her over and over again was not the complaints about the pain nor the, some of the physical challenges she had. It was always about the loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
And so I really believe, just from that experience over that long period of time, and her being of very sound mind and, very mentally cognitive, I really believe that loneliness piece is a much bigger piece than what we assess or that we measure. If we could measure it, I don't know, but I think it is a significant piece. And that's part of, what we do. We are trying to reduce social isolation, to reduce loneliness. That's kind of what we do. And it's through a collar program, and there's other ways that people can do that. Just the ways that I mentioned today are other ways you can help reduce that loneliness, and just believe that you are making a difference, that, a drop in or a apple pie or a visit or carrying stuff out of the yard for someone, it does make a meaningful difference in their life.
This kind of sparked in me. Do you remember, I'm going to say it's 4 years ago, 5 years ago. I think it was Kimberly Lyle. You know Kimberly, right?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. I think she was kind of heading up a project, and it was with a bunch of high school students where they were interviewing seniors and, getting the stories of their lives. Right. And, I thought, wow, that's amazing.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's amazing, right? The connectivity these young people get to learn, get to, understand experiences from people who have gone before them for decades, right? And who grew up in a different time. And these seniors get to share, with these eager young minds, things about that, lessons they've learned through their life, right? I think it's a beautiful thing, right? Now, I know COVID, messes with that, but a lot of that could still be, I'm just amazed that we can't do more with electronic tools in terms of even having support staff. Maybe the folks in the facilities who knew how to use them to set it up for Mary and just say, Mary, here's your niece, Caitlin, talk to her for an hour. Right. And just like that, Mary doesn't have to touch any buttons. She just talks. Right. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I know they did a lot of that. And then It's been restricted somewhat again because of everything else that's required during COVID, the checking and the cleaning and all of that. So it puts just something that can't be as active within the care home, for example, as what it might have been before.
Yeah. And but as you said, isolation, huge, like a huge detrimental effect on our health, on everybody's health, right? We're meant to be with other people. We're social animals, right? We're meant to give hugs and talk to people and such, right? That's what we're built for.
Yeah, then this has been a long time I think for all of us.
Yes.
So the last point, or number 12, was remember that really one of the greatest gifts you can give a senior is the gift of time.
Yes.
And that's something in the world most of us have.
Assist you in being part of that program, or you can look down your neighborhood as Connie Marie did from her living room window. There's 3 houses where she knows she can go see these people who are on their own. They've lost their spouses, and just take them a tea, take them some apple pie, have a chat, sit out on the front step with them, right? Those are all things that could make a huge difference in that person's life. Huge, right?
And it could be right across the street. Like you said, you don't have to register or commit, or it's just could be right across the street.
You would welcome more registrants though, right?
Yeah, we actually have seniors waiting now. Program's been fortunate. We had it kind of more volunteers for a long time, but we actually have seniors now waiting to be paired. And we're seeing definitely winter, as it's on the way. Most of them that I talk to, number one thing I hear every day is, winter's just around the corner, and I don't know if I can do this, again.
Yeah.
This is going to be a long winter if restrictions are as difficult as they have been. It's going to be a long winter for a lot of seniors.
Just to tie on a comment that you just made about, extending your offer of help, being of value to somebody else. I was reading that this is the Lethbridge Family Services annual report.
Yes.
And I just got it the other day, and under the home services part, they had this quote that I loved. It says, "True compassion is hard work, but it's worthwhile. As Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, it is one of the most beautiful compensations of life that no man can sincerely try to help another without helping himself." That's beautiful, eh?
That is perfect.
Yeah. Anything else you want to share with us, Connie Marie?
No, that was awesome. Thank you again for the invitation. And
Connie Marie, you are a beautiful human being who tries to make the world a better place, and I applaud you and thank you for that.
Oh, thank you, Alan, for all you do as well. You're always out there. You're our cheerleaders. So thank you.
All right. Well, let's keep each other strong, encourage each other,